Good evening and welcome. The Department of Toxic Substances Control, also known as DTSC, is hosting this meeting. Tonight, we will be talking about the proposed cleanup activities for the Avenue 34 project, which is located in Lincoln Heights in Los Angeles, California. My name is Jessica Swan, and I am the public participation specialist for this project. I want to thank all of you for taking time to join us this evening amongst your many competing priorities. This meeting is scheduled from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide more information about the proposed cleanup plan at Avenue 34, respond to your questions, and accept public comment for the open public comment period. Luis Garcia, the DTSC project manager, will give a presentation, and this will be followed by a question and answer period. Marcia Rubin, my supervisor, and I will help facilitate. We also have CY Zhang, the DTSC toxicologist for this project, and Dan Philo and John Nagenis from the DTSC Geological Services Unit, and they will be available as well during the Q&A period. After the question and answer period, we will take a short break and then begin the public comment period, which again is for the record. So all of the public comments will be gathered and responded to in a document that's called the response to comments. This will be uploaded to Envirostore and also sent to those who provide their contact information. If you would like a copy of this document sent to you, please send your contact information directly to me in the chat with a note as to whether you would like to receive it via email or mail. Next slide, please. So you can obtain more information about the project on the web at the Envirostore and the DTSC webpage for this specific site. You can also contact Luis or me at the contact information there, or go to the in-person repositories which are located at Lincoln Heights Branch Library, as well as the Chatsworth Regional Office, DTSC. So before we get started, please know that we are hosting this meeting from different locations. We request that you bear with us if there's any time lag or any other technical issues. We sincerely appreciate your patience, understanding, and cooperation in making this a successful meeting. So I now invite our presenter, Luis Garcia, the DTSC project.
Hi, Jessica. Let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, Luis. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Luis Garcia. I am the project manager for the Avenue 34 site for DTSC. And I'd like to thank you for attending this public meeting. Now, what you see in front of you is the Avenue 34 site. I'd like to start off by pointing out some significant landmarks within the vicinity, such as the Metro Gold Line to the west, the former Welch's Uniform Facility to the north, Hillside Elementary to the east, and we have residences located south of the site. Now, the property has multiple addresses, and it includes 4 parcels and is just over 5 acres in size. The property was occupied by a variety of industrial businesses from the 1920s to the 1970s. Now, this included the LA Rock and Gravel Company, several machine shops, electronics manufacturers, specifically ITT, Canon Electronics. So the current site layout that you see before you has remained largely unchanged since the 1980s. Now, previous findings showed that the site was used to store propane and gasoline for automotive uses, and that a clarifier was located in the southwest portion of the property. Now, some of the waste associated with the previous uses of the site includes paints, paint sludges, fuel blends, waste oil, and solvent mixtures. Now, DTSC concluded that additional investigation is needed to determine if the property is suitable for its intended use. Next slide, please. So here we have a figure of what the intended use of the property is. The project is the construction of a 5-story mixed-use building, and it includes residential buildings, which are the brown beige elongated figures that you see before you in the central and western portion of the property, and they run from east to west. And then you also have commercial buildings located on the eastern portion of the property. Now, the project will also include underground parking spaces, and the parking lot will be located underneath the brown beige residential buildings. Now, this is the proponent's goal. How do we make sure it's safe to do that? Next slide, please. Well, investigations were performed, and they were performed under DTSC oversight. Soil and soil gas samples were taken across the property, and 3 groundwater monitoring wells were placed on the southern end of the property. Results of the investigation identified the areas of concern that are shaded in red, and the areas where we believe there might be a source of contamination. Now, once additional investigations were performed and we obtained those results, the areas can change from areas of concern to areas that need to be excavated. So, contamination was found and in soil, and it includes detections of metals such as arsenic, lead, and hexavalent chromium. As for solvents found on the property, they were found as well. And a solvent is a family of chemicals that we can also identified in our investigation as VOCs, and they exist in liquid form and in gas form. Now, what are VOCs, you might ask? VOCs are typically found in industrial products, household cleaners, engine degreasers, and gasoline. And these chemicals may have short and long-term health effects. So the most abundant chemical found at the site include trichloroethene, also known as TCE, tetrachloroethene, also known as PCE, total petroleum hydrocarbons, also known as TPH. Now, the most significant VOC concentrations were found in the west and northwest portion of the site. So I'd like to point out AOC 1, or area of concern 1, that is located in the northwestern area of this figure. So the report concludes that the extent of chemical releases has been generally characterized, and recommends cleanup of these areas of these releases to protect future occupants of the site. Next slide, please. Now, I just mentioned that the significant VOC concentration, soil gas concentrations were found in the west and northwest portions of the site. So here we have the figure showing that region specifically as part of area of concern 1, or AOC 1, that I just mentioned in the last previous slide. And this area was identified as the source of the solvents for tetrachloroethene, or PCE. Now you can see this is the northwest portion of the site by taking a look at the Metro Gold line that runs just west of this portion, and the former Welch's uniform facility just north of that building. Now, we wanted to show you this figure because this area represents the area where the most significant VOC soil gas concentrations were found, and this is the area that's going to be primarily targeted by the soil vapor extraction system. Now, samples were collected from other portions of the property above screening levels. However, they're very low and wouldn't pose a risk to human health on their own. Next slide, please. So, site investigations identified the contaminants such as arsenic, lead, hexavalent chromium, trichloroethene, tetrachloroethene, and petroleum hydrocarbons as primary contaminants of concern. Now, based on these investigations and the concentrations found, the contaminants would pose a risk to future human receptors. Now, what do we mean when I mention human receptors? Human receptors are on-site workers, occupants of the buildings, and nearby residents. So future on-site workers, future occupants of the building, and nearby residents could be at risk, and the routes of exposure would be through inhalation, dermal contact, and incidental ingestion. Next slide, please. Based on the information that we have, the cleanup plans to address the contamination through soil excavation coupled with soil vapor extraction Now, the excavation consists of removing approximately 25,000 cubic yards of impacted soil. These measures will minimize the exposure to the contaminated soil, and the cleanup would also reduce the threat to vapor intrusion into the buildings, as well as the threat to groundwater. Now, the proposed excavation depths are marked on the figure. For example, the southwesternmost area proposes an excavation depth of 6 feet. And the soil would then, once excavated, would then be profiled and to determine where the excavated soil will be disposed of. So the areas shaded in red are being excavated, and VOCs will be removed through soil vapor extraction. The white and green checkered markers are the areas where the soil vapor extraction wells will be placed. And the solid orange circular markers are the areas where the soil vapor probes will be located. Now, the figure shows that the soil vapor extraction area is outside of the excavation areas, and this may change. These are proposed locations, and the exact locations of the soil vapor extraction wells will be determined once the pilot test is completed. Also, additional wells may be added at the conclusion of the pilot test. So how do we know the soil vapor extraction system is done? We will know this through the risk-based cleanup goals that the proponent needs to meet to determine if they are done cleaning up. DTSC has determined that the cleanup project will not have an effect on the environment, and DTSC will continue to provide oversight during the cleanup of the site. Next slide, please. So how does a soil vapor extraction system work, you might ask? Well, here we have a simplified figure of a soil vapor extraction system. Now, the soil vapor extraction is the use of underground extraction wells that essentially uses an industrial-sized vacuum to extract vapor from the subsurface. The suction part of the blower promotes movement out of the soil into the piping system, and the vapor gets treated as they go through the treatment canisters, and clean air comes out of these filters. Now, we can description of we can follow the flow of the process here. The screen intervals, which are located at the below ground surface, which are the vertical pipes, and these are you can see where these wells are located by the arrows pointing at them from both sides, pointing onto the pipe. Now, these screens are the location where the air gets sucked into and helps keep soil particles out. As the air moves into the pipes, the air and the liquid is separated. This is done so the system works as it is intended to, and so that water does not interfere with the removal of the soil gas concentration. So the air then passes through the blower, then gets treated through the carbon filters in the vapor treatment area, and the carbon filter gets disposed of at an offsite facility. As for the liquid, it would also get disposed of as well. Now, a pilot test will be performed to determine the best locations for the soil vapor extraction wells and at what depths to put these screens to extract the vapors. These are operated with the air district permit, and once the best locations for these and depths are determined, a full system design will be submitted to DTSC. Next slide, please. As for safety precautions during the cleanup, a health and safety plan, an air monitoring plan, and a transportation plan will be implemented. During implementation of the cleanup plan, the proponent is required to prepare and submit a health and safety plan. And this health and safety plan is to ensure worker protection related to exposures to dust and vapors during the excavation. The air monitoring plan will be prepared as well, and this monitoring plan is to monitor conditions at the property boundaries during the cleanup. And also, since the project includes excavation, a transportation plan will be drafted for the number of trucks the routes that will be taken, the staging areas for loading and transporting off-site, and to manage traffic during construction as well. Now, during the excavation, suppression measures will be implemented, and air monitoring equipment will be placed around the site. But DTSC will provide oversight to ensure that these plans are implemented properly and that the work notice are posted before activities take place. Next slide, please. Once excavation is completed, confirmation sampling will be used to verify the cleanup goals are met, or if more cleanup is necessary. Now, information from the confirmation sampling results will be used as well as data from the soil vapor extraction system to conduct a risk assessment. And this risk assessment will be will help determine if the site is suitable for its intended use. Now, mitigation measures such as a vapor intrusion mitigation system may be used, which is essentially thick sheeting to prevent, it's designed to prevent the flow of vapors into future buildings. And this is placed between the surface and the building foundation. The goal of the cleanup is to meet unrestricted land use, and institutional controls in the form of a land use covenant may be necessary, may be required, and this would be based on the post-remediation risk assessment. Now, what a land use covenant does is it sets restrictions that run with the land, and they cannot be removed until the site meets unrestricted uses. Additionally, ongoing groundwater monitoring will be required since soil gas concentrations were detected in groundwater above MCLs, or maximum contaminant levels. But at these concentrations, a remedy is typically not feasible. Based on information we have on groundwater, the proponent proposes to monitor groundwater to ensure that conditions do not increase with time. I will now hand this over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Luis. Next slide, please. So we are now at the question and answer session of this meeting. So we again ask you to make your language selection so that you'll be able to fully participate in the meeting. So please find the language icon in your Zoom menu and select your preferred language. Okay, so if you have a question or comment, please you can raise your hand using the toolbar at the bottom the toolbar on your Zoom screen, or typing into the Q&A feature, or if you're calling in by phone, you can press *6. If you are calling in on either the Spanish or Mandarin line, please give us a few moments and our interpreters will direct you on how to make your questions. So we will do our best to respond to all of the questions in the order that we receive them. And we will begin by taking some of the questions that were answered into Q&A during the presentation. Marcia, would you please read us the first question?
Sure. So our first question comes from CT Williams. Can DTSC provide a detailed economic cost analysis to verify that costs will be less than $2 million, especially for disposal of contaminated materials? What disposal treatment site will receive the contaminated excess materials?
Thank you, Marcia. Luis, would you please address that question?
The question was on the amount of the cleanup, the cost amount on the cleanup. Is that right?
Luis, you can find the question in the answered column. When we answer the questions live, we move it over to that answer column so that anyone can see it and hear and be able to read the question, especially for you who is answering it. So if you open the question and answer feed, you'll see the question was posed at 7:08 p.m. from CT Williams, and they're posted in order of time.
Okay, yeah, the cost estimate that was the cost that they submitted was a projected cost, and they projected that the cost would be under 2 million. Now, a detailed breakdown of this, I believe that's that will be submitted in the near future. I don't think they've submitted a detailed breakdown. They did submit a projected estimate, though. As soon as we get that estimate, we can post that up on EnviroStore.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Luis.
Luis. Marcia, next question.
Our next question is, does DTSC have a memorandum of understanding with Los Angeles City Department of Building and Safety regarding staging and hauling route? And you'll find this in the answered column, and the question was posed at 7:09 p.m.
Marcia, you're an hour ahead.
Sorry. I'm in New Mexico, looking after my mom. She broke one of her vertebrae.
Okay. So, Luis, can you respond to that question regarding the hauling routes?
Sorry about that. Yeah, the transportation plan is one of a few things that will be submitted in a remedial design implementation plan. And so details and specifics of the transportation plan will be submitted then. And included in the that implementation plan would also envelop details of the confirmation sampling, groundwater monitoring, health and safety plan. But the transportation plan details will be submitted at a later time.
Thank you, Luis. And Jose, I see your hand up. Did you want to also provide comment on that response as well?
Yes, we do not have MOA City of Los Angeles regarding staging and the hauling routes. But what the proponent is required to do is they are required to get grading permits and also to provide and to present transportation plans to the city for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marcia, our next question, please.
Sure. This question comes from Christian Adams at 6:19 p.m. Apologies for my time difference. Will the boundaries of contamination be investigated?
And Luis, can you?
I think I'll defer this over to CY.
Yeah, my name is CY Jiang. I'm again DTSC's toxicologist assigned to this project. So usually we, for a given site, we look at the site data first and compare with the very conservative screening level. In this case, we are using residential screening level, and noted that the elevated soil vapor concentration, they are really on the western portion, and a little bit on the central, and also the soil impact are limited and did not extend it offsite. We also understand there are some quote unquote exceedance of these conservative screening level, but I want to emphasize that this screening level are based on very conservative assumption. Concentration higher than screening level does not mean it poses the risk or cleanup is needed, and just that we need to properly assess the potential risk.
DCY, Marcia, can you please provide us our next question?
Why are there no PCB sampling testing, as the railroad would have been a potential source of hydraulic fluids used by railroad trains?
And Luis, would you speak to that, or would that go to CY?
This is Jose Diaz. Unless we need to look further into that. We frankly look for PCBs associated with releases from transformers. We looked at that, and soil samples were collected for that. And we'll look into into this issue of PCBs released from railroad lines. In my experience, I'm not familiar as to whether those are significant releases from operations or railroad lines. But we can look into that. If anybody else on the panel, maybe Mr. Naguinez, if you're able to chime in on that.
Jose, this is Dan Philo. We did do, as you stated, PCB testing across the site at depths from a ½ foot to as deep as 8 feet, I believe. And we didn't have any detections of PCBs where we did samples. So they were all non-detects. Just that information can be found in the phase 2 that was conducted in June of 2021, although that data is not in the RAP.
Raw.
Raw.
Thank you. Marcia, next question, please.
So this question from CT Williams is access to reports and communicate through PRA requests.
Sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. Would you repeat that or let us know or let me know what was that at 622? How do we get access to reports and communications through PRA and DTSC or request to TSC? So you can make a PRA request to DTSC through the proper channels. Can get you that information. I can send it to you after this meeting. Thank you for your question.
If I may just add, Jessica, though, we prefer not to have PRAs because then we have to get our legal staff involved and then it takes a little bit longer to respond. So everything that gets generated from the investigation and cleanup of this property, once we do an initial review to make sure they have the significant components of a report or a work plan and making sure like it kind of passes, what we call the wiggle test, make sure that it has sufficient information in accordance with our guidance documents, then we make it available. We can make it available. It doesn't have to be a final report. We'll make it available as soon as we have it on our public profile of EnviroStore. So, and again, you can contact Luis with any questions on any reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Marcia, our next question, please.
Our next question comes from Christian Adams. Is the amount of samples taken enough to confidently submit evidence of the limitations of the contamination?
This is Jose Diaz again. And yes, we have sufficient information. As you know, we start our initial assessment of sites, but looking at the areas of concern, and then we add some random samplings throughout a property to determine if anything else, could be possibly for whatever reason could have been placed somewhere else, or there's a preferential pathway or some sort of utility that could transport something out of a building or out of an area that was the center of any industrial process. So we believe that, it's once we have the area screened and then we move on into the investigation and we determined in general the lateral and vertical extent of that contamination, then we say, well, does it require a cleanup or not based on the risk assessment? Then we make the determination, yeah, it needs a cleanup. So once we implement the cleanup, then we can expand even a little bit more on quote unquote, getting more information or characterization of the area when we conduct the confirmation sampling or the sampling that is done after you clean up.
I just want to touch up on that. there's been a total of 51 soil gas samples to date, 246 soil samples in total, and 8 groundwater samples taken so far at the Avenue 34 site.
Thank you, Luis. Okay, so Marcia, your internet has been breaking up a little bit, so I'm going to give it a rest and take over really quickly. Luis, if you would please let us know, will the SVE system remediation effort be pre or post building demolish?
Well, the soil vapor, the SVE system currently is placed in a way whereas it's to the west, the northwesternmost portion away from the excavation area, and it's placed in a way where it can run for a long time without being disturbed. So I believe they expect to meet the cleanup goals in approximately 18 months. So the buildings, I mean, whether they want to start the excavation, for example, of the parking lot or not, they have to meet the cleanup goals for the intended use. If they want to start the excavation and start the work for the Avenue 34 site, I mean, it doesn't matter. They have to meet those cleanup goals in order to be able to use the site for the again, for its intended use for residences. So thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Okay, and Marcia, can you?
Sure. Our next question comes from Sarah McCoy. Groundwater occurs very deep. Water tables are generally 50 to 300 feet. Why just 6 feet of removal of groundwater?
So I will direct this question to Dan first, and then I'll allow you to let anybody else pick it up after that.
Sure. So groundwater here at Avenue 34 is between 37 and 41 feet below ground surface. I'm actually not 100% clear what the question is asking.
Sorry,
6 feet of removal of
sorry,
groundwater?
Dan. So Sarah just typed into the chat that she meant soil. So we are going to redirect. So not groundwater. We were talking about.
Jessica, I mentioned 6 feet of removal at the southwesternmost portion during my presentation. So that those the removal depth are based on the contaminants that were found at different locations. So only at that area it's going to be a 6 feet below ground surface. Some of those other areas have different depths. I believe the
Marcia?
northwestern portion has 15, 2 areas, 15 and 20 feet, if I remember correctly. And then the southeastern portions have other depths as well.
Mm-hmm. If you can find that slide, Marcia, at all, that would be wonderful. So yes, it is 6 feet in some areas and other depths. And we will try to get you a visual right now. Right here.
Yeah. This one?
Mm-mm,
This
that
is
one.
the
There we go.
excavation area. Yeah.
Yes, the excavation areas. So here's a photograph, and Luis, if you want to take over, photograph showing the excavation area.
Yeah, no, I was just explaining that those excavations are based on the contaminants that were found at different depths. I mean, down at the southwestern southeastern portion, the concern there was arsenic. At the northwestern portion, the concern there, again, it was the VOCs. At the southwestern portion that 6 feet, I believe it was metals as well. So again, those excavation depths, they're just based on previous investigations that were done to date.
And also as a reminder, once the initial removal is completed, information sampling will be done to ensure that the goals have been met for the cleanup. Okay, so next question, please, Marcia.
All right, Sarah McCormick, for the existing encampments on the property, how will these unhoused people be treated? Will affordable housing be provided for them elsewhere in the city?
Luis, I believe we had a brief discussion about this at some point, so if you could talk about that a little bit.
Right, the Avenue 34 folks would like to use the some of the areas that are being used as encampments for staging areas. I do not know how where or how this transfer is going to be handled, but I can look into it some more and maybe provide more details. I just know that these areas they would like to clear them to be used for staging areas for construction of the Avenue 34 project. I can look into it some more and maybe you can write her info down so we can follow up.
Thank you. So it's not the actual site that encampments are found, but the adjacent site, and that is being proposed for staging activities for remedial action and construction. Okay. Yes, so we've answered several of the questions that have been posed in the chat. So I would like to take this opportunity to take some of the attendees who have raised their hand. Christina Adams, I'm sending you an option to speak. If you'd like to verbalize your question. Oh, Christian, I apologize.
Yeah, oh, that's all right. Is the soil vapor extraction going to take place in an open air environment? I guess that'd be for Luis. And then I wanted him to elaborate as far as the groundwater cleanup. It doesn't seem like it's a feasible option. And you said that since that groundwater cleanup wouldn't be a feasible option, the alternative was to just be monitoring it to make sure that the levels of contaminants don't increase. What if during construction they do increase? What would be the outcome of such a thing like that?
Okay, so I heard two parts of your question. So one discussing the SVE system and the operation, how that's going to operate, and then another one about contamination in groundwater. So I will direct the first part of that question to Luis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I still unmuted?
Yes.
And then the last one, just because I asked the question in the beginning, will the boundaries of the contamination be investigated? I mean, precisely investigated, that goes beyond the site. So it'd be off-site, and to what extent has contamination off-site? What are the levels reading off-site, obviously? All right, that's all. Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you. So for the first part of the question regarding the SVE system, please, Luis.
Yeah, I wasn't.
I can answer that question. Soil vapor extraction systems operate outside. You see them operating all the time in gas stations. I mean, you used to see them a lot more frequently in the past when a lot of the single wall tanks, underground storage tanks, were removed. So you used to see the soil vapor extraction system just operating, right next to the gas station. So yes, it is a system that operates outside, but the extraction, of the vapors as it moves through the piping is all, within the piping, and then as it goes through the water gas separator, it's still it's still contained, and then when the gases get pushed in through the filter media that treats them, they're still containerized, and then once the air is cleaned up of all the contaminants, it is at that point they get emitted into the atmosphere. And again, like Luis said, this, the permitting requirements from the Air Quality Management District are very strict. When you start operating the system, there is continuous monitoring right at the beginning. And then as they get confidence that their system is operating properly, then they can reduce the frequency of doing the sampling at different stages of the soil vapor extraction system. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. So for the groundwater levels of contamination and current monitoring and plans around groundwater, and would you please address that question?
Yes, I can also answer that question. So yes, the groundwater concentrations that we see in this site, unfortunately, they're pretty normal throughout the urban setting of Southern California, of industrial areas that have been used in the past. And so a lot of times, these detections are on what we call first encounter groundwater. So is the top, is not a very significant, water bearing zone that produces a lot of water. So it's not something that like a drinking water well is going to be placed and screened at those depths. So that's where we find, the first encounter water, we find low concentration. So that's when we say that implementing a remedy, you have two types of remedy. You can do pump and treat. And of course, the minute you're going to construct a lot of wells in a treatment system, and of course, it's very expensive, but, the system is going to have very limited operation because there's not a lot of water, so it's just dries up the area pretty quick. So the other type of treatment that can be done is what we call in situ or in place. So this involves the application of a treatment through a system of injection wells surrounded by a bunch of groundwater monitoring wells to ensure that the treatment is working and that it doesn't impact groundwater in a negative way. And this treatment is done with a permit from the water board. So there's very strict monitoring requirements, a lot of reporting. And again, because the remedies, while they're well-proven technologies where you have high concentrations in solid water-bearing zones, they're very efficient. But when you have low concentrations and the water-bearing zone is kind of spotty, then you just spend a lot of your efforts and resources into something that is really not going to give you a lot of value for all the resources that were used to that. So that's what we mean feasibility of the remedy. We have to make sure that whatever is spent to address a contaminated area, make sure you get your value, that is, you're providing something valuable and that is being protective of human health and the environment at the same time.
Okay, and as to the discussion of off-site sampling?
What I believe I already explained, we believe that, that again, the releases from this site are pretty much, as CY explained, they're pretty much, contained within the property boundaries. But again, we will know more when the remedy's implemented, when the soil vapor extraction system starts operating, and to see if there's a need. A lot of times, again, when we get into these areas where they have been used for industrial purposes in the past, or you have other sources of potential migration of contaminants moving around the area, so we got to be very careful to make sure that we don't start bringing somebody else's plume into the picture as well. So that is a balancing act that we always, that we always have to play with when we're looking at delineation and implementation of a remedy.
Melanie, Lomo, I have, would you like to verbalize your question?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. All right. So my question, I'm on the neighborhood council, and I was at the last meeting where you answered someone's question about investigating the sewers by saying that the DTSC reserves the right to investigate the sewers after the cleanup. But if you know there's a risk of contamination running through the sewers now, why aren't you investigating the sewers now? My belief, or my impression was that that's the DTSC's, your guidance says you're supposed to do before even proposing a cleanup plan. Isn't that what you guys are supposed to do? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. I don't believe that that's how I phrased that response, but I will go ahead and allow Luis to elaborate on, or actually, I believe, Dan, you and I discussed the sewers and utility lines. So if you would go ahead and take this question.
Sure. So, yeah, a couple of sewer lines have been identified on the property, and the raw right now states that they will be investigated as the raw is implemented. They haven't been identified as a major source of contamination on the property at this point, and components of the raw will be modified and can be modified as they are implemented. So if contamination is identified along those sewer lines, the raw will be modified to address that contamination if it is discovered.
Thank you, Dan. And moving on to Richard Larson, if you would like to verbally express your comment.
Thank you, Jessica, Luis, and Jose. My question is, will the testing and remedial services be provided by contractors hired by the state or the developer? And if so, what assurances will we have that the same kind of bias testing will not occur again, as we have already witnessed from the developer and his engineering consultant, who claimed there was very little pollution on the site and that therefore he would have no problem living there with his family?
Thank you, Richard. Luis, can you discuss DTSC oversight in regards to the site, as well as the environmental consultant?
I believe what was being referred to as the phase one, which the phase one is basically a record search, and based on that information, I believe that was a conclusion that they reached. So what they have to do after that is have to prove and create some borings and sample the property to make sure that what they're concluding really is true, and that's exactly what they did. So the phase two was performed. Phase two was conducted. After the phase two, they did a supplemental analysis and then the site characterization work plan. So after that phase one, or the record search, where they did come to that conclusion, DTSC required that they do additional investigations to prove, that the site is suitable for what they intend to use it for. So after these investigations, now where we stand is here, where they present the raw, and they propose soil excavation and soil vapor extraction at the Avenue 34 site. So,
Luis, can you talk about DTSC oversight and as well as the consultant change that happened during the in between phase one and I believe phase two?
Yeah, I believe they did change consultants. I'm not sure if I was part part of the project then. But either way, they have to present that information over to DTSC, and we will verify that the information is true and correct. Again, just like in the raw, they can make their proposals, they can make their conclusions. We are here to verify that information and make sure that they're doing the correct work in regards to this property here.
Okay, Jose, do you have comments to add to that response?
Yeah, I just wanted to, add a little bit about our process. Yes, when we provide oversight on the investigation and cleanup of properties in the state of California, we do require the responsible party, property owners or proponents, whichever way, however they are characterized, we require them to hire their environmental consultant that has to be a professional in the state of California. Professionally, they has to have, the professional engineer, the professional geologist to, sign off on any investigation and any report and anything that they generate. And our professionals will review those documents. Now, as Luis mentioned, we do provide oversight. And if we have any reason to believe that, they're taking shortcuts, they're sending, like, for example, soil samples to a lab that is not certified by the state or things like that. If we suspect that they're doing something in the field to, manipulate the results of any investigation, we have the capability also to collect our own samples and compare them to what they're doing. So yes, and as part of our oversight, we require the responsible party as well to pay for our oversight costs. So yeah, that is our process, that, a requirement that the responsible party pay for hires the environmental consultant and pay for our oversight cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Okay, and Fernanda Sanchez, would you like to verbalize your question at this time?
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for your time today. I remember reading that a DTSC geologist made a recommendation several years ago stating that DTSC should conduct testing in the neighborhood to determine the effects of Welch's pollution on the surrounding community. Did DTSC ever determine Welch's impacts on the neighbors? It sounds like DTSC hasn't, based off of the previous answers regarding offsite samples, and it seems just clearly negligent to think that the contamination has only stayed within the boundaries of this project. I shouldn't have to remind that there are homes and schools right across Avenue 34. DTSC certainly has a responsibility to inform and protect our communities from hazardous waste. And on that, why hasn't DTSC conducted an investigation for the schools and homes around Avenue 34 now? Thank you.
Fernanda, thank you so much for your question. I believe we talked about this. This question was posed at the Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Council meeting. So we did do some searching, and John McGinnis, who has joined us this evening, was, we believe, the geologist on the project during the time where this memo may have been written. So John, would you please talk to us about anything that you may have found in your records regarding a statement like this?
Hello, this is John. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I was worked on the Welch's project for several years. I wrote a memo, I think it was in 2006 or 2007, stating that it appeared groundwater contamination may extend off-site and that should be investigated. Additional wells were put in on-site and off-site to evaluate that, and we did not see high concentrations migrating from the site. But that was for groundwater. It wasn't any soil or anything that would have affected neighbors. So that was my recommendation, and it was followed up on. But again, that was strictly groundwater.
Thank you, John. And Jose, did you have something to add to that, or did I just get to remove your hand? Okay. Thank you. Pink Acre, would you like to verbalize your question at this time?
Sure. Hi. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so DTSC's voluntary agreement with the developers says that the investigation and cleanup must follow all state and federal guidelines. And there's, the same deviations from the guidelines that other callers have brought up by not investigating the sewer before or other underground pipelines before you even propose a cleanup plan, which is required under DTSC vapor intrusion guidelines. We know that the sewers are running right next to vapor plumes. The developers' consultants believe that those sewers are leaking. And so DTSC guidance says that when toxics reach those underground utilities, it's impossible to predict how far they'll travel. And the only way to determine the risks is to actually test the sewers. So do these sewers go to homes on the other side of the street? Are they carrying those contaminants to the other side of the street and up into people's homes? And has DTSC investigated that? I know you've said you will during excavation, but the excavation will only go to 20 feet and these sewers are at 25 feet. So have you either gone by your recommendations to investigate the sewers, or have you actually failed to abide by all state and federal guidelines as your contract requires?
Sorry about that. So I believe that your dog in the background triggered my dogs in the background. So I apologize. As regarding the sewer question, I believe that we've discussed it. If Luis or Jose would like to address this again, please go ahead at this time. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move forward. Okay, thank you. Silva Blackstone, if you would like to verbalize your question at this time.
Hello, Silva Blackstone, retired certified arborist. And I recall at a meeting last year, I guess it was a public meeting or a hearing, that I mentioned that I had observed the Welch's facility on the drawings or maps or documents for the project. And I said, I think this is possibly a brownfield site. And the developer's representative at the end of the meeting, or at the end of the public comment, had a few answers. And one of them was, the answers was, oh no, this is not a brownfield site. So I doubt that we can trust anything that they're doing. And I think there needs to be like extreme rigorous oversight of what they're doing above and beyond, because I don't think they can be trusted. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I was not in attendance at that meeting. I don't know that we have anyone that would be able to respond to that. So we appreciate your comment. And thank you. Sarita Mahine, I apologize if I butcher anybody's name. If you would like to verbalize your comment, please do so now. Question.
Hi, thank you. How is the cleanup going to protect? I work right across the street. So how is the cleanup going to protect me from any hazardous materials that are, or vapors that are rising from the ground already, if my area is also contaminated? I would assume if from what you've found across the street, there's no reason that it wouldn't also be under me. So how am I being affected right now? I just want to know.
Okay, so I would like for somebody in my technical team to talk about the way VOCs travel so that we can explain that to the community, so we can get some of that information out of, then I would like CY, if you could talk about risk-based assessments and how we sort of did those.
Yeah, okay, yeah, this is CY. I guess let me give a try on both questions.
Thank you.
Because they are related. Yeah, definitely. We understand, there's a lot of concern about the neighborhood and school. And these are legitimate concern. And we also don't assume that, contamination start at the property boundary. But what we did is look at the data we have on site, and some of them are all the way to property boundary. And so far, these data, both soil and soil vapor, and John already talked about groundwater, so I'm not touching on that. But both soil and soil vapor, they show significant decrease, and in most cases, actually below residential criteria. And I mentioned about some of the residential screening criteria. Regulatory agency use are very conservative, but we do also look at those exceedance, make sure that they are not significant to affect the community. And as far as during the cleanup, yeah, how do we control the dust and vapor? Because that definitely would be generating, during the excavation, and also for SVE, the vapor will be extracted, but that, I think Luis explained that it will be treated to meet the AQMD standard before discharge. But the bottom line is there's going to be a very rigorous health and safety plan, and also the what we call the community air monitoring plan that's set up at the property boundary to ensure that these on-site activities, they do not affect the surrounding community. And if we see something that trigger what we call the action level, either for the dust or for vapor, that the additional control, like put more water or just stop the work, would be in place until these vapor or dust level reduce to the level. Again, these are AQMD levels that we comply with, and that would be part of the this air monitoring plan. So we definitely are going to put a lot of effort to make sure that during the cleanup, that the community is not going to be adversely affected.
And I can add a little bit about excavations in general when we have contaminated areas. These excavations are not like a massive grading project where you have all kinds of equipment running around all over the place. These are very surgical operations. You have one, possibly two excavators that that do the excavation process, very methodically and very slow to ensure that the dust is not created. And then if soil gets staged in an area, again, it's placed in a way where it doesn't create a lot of dust. And if it has to be staged there for a while, it is covered. If it's directly loaded into a truck, again, you have all the monitoring equipment, the workers, to make sure that they're protected first. And then, the fence line monitoring will also help us ensure that, if there's any detections of any dust at high concentrations at the fence line, then we will know, okay, something's going on here. They're not following their dust suppression measures properly, or they need to do a better job of doing that. So the excavations are not massive grading projects. They're very surgical, step by step, and with the proper monitoring present at all times. Thank you.
Thank you, both CY and Jose, for addressing that. So right now, I'm going to pause so that we can ask our interpreters to see if we have any questions from those who have called in on our language call-in lines. So if I can start with the Spanish call-in line, Brittany or Sol, ask our conference line attendees if they have any questions, and then let us know. I'll give you a few minutes. Okay, moving on to Dave Chappell. If you would like to go ahead and verbally express your question, please do so now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Can the community hire their own oversight committee? Or is the DTSC assuming all responsibility in this? Are you the only oversight committee? Because it just seems like a fox in the hen house. Thank you.
So, thank you for your question. And Jose, maybe you can give a little bit of information about our oversight activities, and then I can discuss a little bit about community involvement.
Yeah, we're not a committee. We're a government agency that is tasked with, overseeing the investigation and cleanup of properties contaminated with hazardous materials or hazardous waste. So that's, and, with the mission to protect human health and the environment. That's our mission. So, as I mentioned before, we provide oversight and we make sure that, consultants, proponents, responsible parties follow our guidelines or follow regulations related to the cleanup. Well, as far as there is other sites, high profile sites, if you have read about, like Santa Susana, Stringfellow, where the cleanups have taken years and years to occur. They have formed what they call community
Advisory
groups. So they have experts within their group and they review documents, and the same process, kind of like what we're doing now. We make all the documents available for anyone to ask questions and to provide input. So certainly a group of people can review documents and provide their recommendations. And, we take the input and we evaluate as to whether something needs to be changed. And we consider that all the time. And we get a lot of input in a lot of our sites.
Thank you, Jose. So our next question comes from RB. If you would like to go ahead and verbalize your question now.
Yes, I know that the monitors you guys put on site is actually to protect the employees. Sometimes you cannot control wind, and wind can take the dust off of campus. So I want to know if you are creating like a safety plan. So when those times that it gets too much that you have to stop, how are you going to advise the community and especially the schools? Because I think the schools need to know to keep the kids indoors. So I want to know what the plan's going to be, because airborne, that's out of control. And the wind is not under your control either.
Correct. And so yes, like I mentioned, the first alarm is visible dust. You see it in construction sites, you see it in vacant lots, and that's your indication that it's windy, right? So AQMD has this requirement that if I believe it's either 20 or 25 miles per hour sustained winds, no work can occur. Well, I've been to a bunch of sites and I've had wind meters with me, and even like at 15 miles an hour, it feels like it's 40 miles an hour. So again, if the work cannot be done safely, we shut down operations the minute we see visible dust, regardless whether they're, sometimes they may not be working. The dust may just be blowing from the region, so we are not going to get involved into an operation where that could be misconstrued as dust that is coming from this side. So yeah, the wind is when wind, anytime, you start getting that at 8-10 miles an hour, wind speeds, is just not a good idea to work. And yeah, there is monitoring. So yeah, the monitoring, there's two types of monitoring. There's OSHA required monitoring, that the employer is required to conduct while their employees are working on whatever they're doing. They're working with any kind of hazardous materials or any hazardous conditions. There has to be a plan to conduct the work. They do what they call a hazard analysis, and then they evaluate what can go wrong and what are potential mitigation measures, what can, and then you have your emergency measures, how you're going to react, what are you going to call, who's going to call what. So anyways, yeah, there's a safety plan. And so this is a construction job. So everything that you see in any construction site that they are required to do, you have those requirements, plus you have the rigorous air monitoring that is required for working with hazardous substances. And so that's the initial, monitoring that is done. And then you expand the monitoring to the fence line or to critical points where you can say, okay, this is where based on, what we know about wind directions, regardless of what the wind speeds or whatever, we need to know that we have, a monitor like downwind or in one upwind, or we have like you mentioned a school. Well, we want to put a monitor in that direction pretty much all the time to make sure that we are monitoring that side of the site.
I just want to follow up on that. So yeah, the work will be performed under BMPs or best management practices during the excavation. It would include dust suppression methods, managing stockpiles. There should be AQMD signage if you have any concerns, and you can also contact us from DTSC. You can contact Jessica. You can contact me, Jose. We're all available, and our information is online, and it's also on the presentation as well. And I believe we'll make that available, right, Jessica?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Luis. Okay, just a couple of reminders, everyone. The chat specifically is on so that you all will have an opportunity to send me your contact information if you guys would like the response to comments document. This is not an area to send us comments or questions. If you have comments or if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. For the Q&A section, this is not an area to put the public comment, which will be the public comment section will occur after the Q&A session. Please only use the Q&A for questions. Please do not use it for comments. Please only use the chat function to send me your contact information if you would like a response to comments document. Okay, thank you so much.
And I see a couple folks have put their email addresses into the Q&A. I'm gonna switch that over to get it in that, and I'm gonna dismiss it so your email address will not be visible. So I'm cleaning up any of that.
Yes, thank you so
So
much.
don't worry, if you put your email address somewhere, we're gonna get it. And also, if you've registered for this webinar, we have your email address as well. So we'll continue to stay in touch.
Thank you. So moving forward, Diego Zapata, if you would like to verbalize your question at this time, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So my question reads as follows. Does DTSC consider the potential for cumulative human health impacts posed by other contaminants within adjacent areas to determine or inform suitable levels of contamination removal or remediation? Lincoln Heights is plagued by a legacy of environmental racism that has likely caused a higher incidence rate of chronic diseases that make community members particularly vulnerable for additional exposure risks posed by the Avenue 34 project. Additionally, I'd also like to ask, would DTSC be willing or open to testing soil from nearby residences willing to submit access for testing on their properties? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your question. So discuss cumulative impacts and what and if we address them during our oversight. CY, would you please?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, currently there is no plan to look at the regional cumulative risk. We do plan to look at cumulative effect from all the contaminants, found at the site. The bigger issue of assessing the cumulative effect, I think DTSC, KLEPA has a program. Yeah, we will take this back into our management, but this project team right now is really focusing on site-related cumulative risk.
Thank you so much. And Jose, would you talk briefly about, again, about offsite sampling?
Yes, at this point, based on the information that we have, we do not have any, DTSC does not have any plans to go into residential properties and start doing sampling on residential properties. We have done it in other sites, and we have, we have to do it because the extent of contamination, definitely has migrated, and it poses a risk to occupants of a residential property. We have done it where, they have to install a soil vapor extraction system on that property. So it's not unusual for us to go around and ask for access to residential properties. And if, like I said, if the data drives us towards that, we don't have a problem requiring the proponent, the property owner, to expand investigations and possibly clean up into residential properties. The challenge has always been getting access, as that becomes a whole different ballgame. But yes, we will look into that if we have to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. So, Beth, I'm not going to try your last name. If you would like to verbalize your question, please. So
yeah, thank you. I am looking at the plan that you guys are distributing with these red shaded areas, and I'm just wondering why these boundaries seem so defined if there's been so much testing to reveal the toxicity throughout the soil. I don't understand why the whole site wouldn't be treated as a toxic place.
Okay. So we have a couple of maps that have red boundaries on them. Can you tell me a little bit more about the one that you're looking at specifically?
Yeah, it's the one in the community update draft removal action work plan. And it's on the second page.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much. Okay. So why are these boundaries so defined if the, depending on the contamination at the site? So Luis, can you talk about a little bit about the different contaminants that are found in the different areas and kind of why we're excavating to certain depths at certain areas?
Yeah, I was the question referring as just how straight those lines are, how well defined those are.
In comparison to the contamination found on site. So I think
on at the rest of the site.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not muted yet, right? I can clarify. I think for me, it's why wouldn't you just make the whole site an excavation site and then properly excavate the site?
Yeah, so large, a portion of contamination was found at the central portion of that site, which will be a lot of that soil will be excavated to begin with as part of that parking lot that's going to be built. So that will go down, I believe, approximately 25 feet below ground surface. As far as all these other portions, these areas were defined based on based on a risk assessment, and so I think I mentioned previously the different areas of concern. The northwesternmost portion related to VOCs, the southwesternmost portion, related to hexavalent chromium. So this is just based on previous investigations found, the risk assessment, and what risk it would pose to the future occupants of the site.
If I may,
CY,
yeah. No, if I may just add, yeah, these are proposed excavation areas. These may not be, perfectly aligned lines here. Okay, they're proposed areas. This is our best guess, based on the contouring that has been done, based on the results of the investigation. These excavations can look completely different by the time we're done, and it happens all the time with excavations. Okay, this is what this proposed. We try to do our best to, estimate the number of cubic yards and tons that are coming out of there, but things change. Nothing changes more on one of our projects like excavations.
And
Okay,
they'll change based on that confirmation sampling.
Correct. So one thing that I just want to add in general, for sites that are typically contaminated with vapors, with solvents, like in this case, area 1, most of the time, they just operate a soil vapor extraction system. Okay, but as indicated before, since the project was already proposing to excavate to construct the underground parking, well, that when you put those two things together, you provide a better cleanup when you're removing the soil. When we do an evaluation of the alternatives, technologies available for cleaning up a site, typically the most expensive removal or remediation or cleanup of a site is excavation of all the contamination and shipping it off site somewhere else. So again, that's just, in some cases, well, you're just transferring the problem somewhere else. Well, if there's a way of doing it in a clean way, soil vapor extraction, eliminating the risk to human health, then, you have this opportunity to remove a lot of the contamination with excavation. Sure, to benefit the developer that is going to develop, the property. They're already paying for the excavation to do, so now they got to pay more to deal with the proper excavation, profiling, and disposal of contaminated soil. So that is a significant cost, to them as well. So, yeah, it's like I said, this is our best estimate at this point. That is going to be truly defined when you start excavating. And when we start looking at what we find, you never know what you're going to find, if concentrations are going to decrease or increase. That is part of the cleanup. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. And so we are going to move back to our typed Q&A. Marcia, if you'd like to lead us off.
Sure. So our next question comes from Sarah McCormick. Where do the capture vapors get released afterwards?
Oh, I think actually we
that one get addressed?
Well, I think we
Sorry.
sort of addressed it. But maybe we can go into that a little bit more. So they go into a media, right, guys? Technical team, they go into a media and then they get filtered out. Can someone explain the SV system one time?
Yeah, the vapors is contaminated air, right? As you extract it from the subsurface, you know, it's contaminated air that you're bringing up through the wells, and it goes into the treatment vessels. And in the treatment vessels, the contamination gets trapped in the activated carbon, and then it releases clean air into the atmosphere.
Okay. Our next question is from Seth Holland. Can DTSC comment on the nearby quarter mile of AMCAL project developed a few years ago? I believe Jessica is going to respond to you in writing because we really want to focus on the Avenue 34 project tonight. So we appreciate the questions. We know that there is a lot of work in the area. Jessica is the public participation specialist for this region in LA. So you can, if you want to talk about other projects in the area, please feel free to reach out to her, and she'll do her best to get you answers and stay in communication with you. So for those questions that we find that aren't related to this project tonight, we're going to skip over those, focus on this one, and then please stay in communication with Jessica, and she will follow up with you. So we are going to take the next question from Joe. And Joe says, sorry for my misplaced question, but is there any concern for the school in close proximity to the site?
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is CY. I can answer this. And in fact, I think the next question from Robina from California Safe Schools had similar questions. So yeah, let me try to answer both at the same time. Yes, we definitely aware there are some sensitive receptors like school and residents around this site. And that's why, you know, we mentioned that not only based on the current data that we don't believe the contamination is moving offsite, but we will continue to monitor the site condition during and after cleanup, like Jose say, if needed, we definitely will expand the effort. And I also want to mention that, in fact, the proposed cleanup is really not only to support future site use, but it will also ensure that the community will continue to remain safe. Because I think the previous question about the vapor migration, even right now, there's no evidence of vapor migrating offsite. But as long as the vapor, the source is there, there's always a potential, and that's why this cleanup is very important to continue to make sure that the community remains safe.
You see why?
Thank you.
Garcia, please, next question.
The next question is from Lawrence Brown. Has a timeline for the remediation effort, removal action, and building construction been developed yet?
I don't have a timeline with me. I don't know, Jose, if you're aware of any timeline of this development. We're as far as I know, we're just concerned with the cleanup, making sure that it's suitable for the residences that are proposed at the Avenue 34 site.
Yeah, as I mentioned, soil vapor extraction was used on the Welch's property, and it worked pretty well. So the estimate at this time for operating the soil vapor extraction system is 18 months. Duration of the excavation, based on what we know now, is 6 to 8 weeks. As far as the actual development, building, construction, that we don't know. We just, that we're not involved in that. So I don't know how long building construction, how long is that going to take? Thank you.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Garcia.
Our next question is from an anonymous attendee asking, what is going to happen to any historical artifacts found? This is the site of a famous pottery factory from the 1900s.
Luis, can you address some
I
of
could-
those?
Yeah.
Okay, Jose.
Yeah, with a redevelopment project, the big project, not the cleanup, but the redevelopment of the property. As part of their CEQA, they are also required to, to make sure that they, that they comply with requirements of, historical uses of the property or any material or any artifacts that are found and other things that could be found, human remains, things like that. They have a notification process for that the proponent needs to follow. So, DTSC, that's kind of like jurisdiction. We try to stay with the hazardous materials, hazardous waste, hazardous substances part, but the proponent, the project, the redevelopment of the area, they're supposed to comply with that. If they find anything that has some historical value, then they have the process for documenting and contacting historical societies or things like that to ensure that those materials or those artifacts are preserved.
Thank you, Jose. Marcia, our next question, please.
So our next question is about screening levels. So what levels do we use as our screening levels? It's about screening levels for residential construction.
Sorry, CY, can you address that?
Actually, I think Marcia, you answered it. The screening level we use are based on the standard residential scenario, meaning assuming, resident live in the same place for 26 years and, 350 days a year, with 2 weeks vacations and 24 hours a day. And this is standard. And that's how we derive screening level. And that's also how we use to estimate the risk. And this site is the same as many other sites that DTSC approved for residential development. And like Luis said in his presentation, the goal is to make sure the site meet the residential criteria before the construction can or the occupancy can take place.
We have a question about day-to-day timelines where the community can access information. So Jessica, you might want to share about.
I do. So a couple of things. Dang it, now I gotta go find it. So while the work is happening, we will be posting work notices that will allow the community to know what is the basic outline of what's going to be happening at the site. That will have contact information on it, and essentially what safety measures are going to be taken and what you're going to see here on the site for like a given time frame. And so when we know more about the timeline, that's when we'll be able to produce work notices to tell you what kind of work is going to be done if the proposed draft ROG gets approved, right? So then the next part of that question, I totally lost it. Is it down at the bottom?
It's at the bottom. It came in a little bit earlier. It's the question was about the day-to-day timeline and where people can find that information.
Where people can find information. So in addition to our EnviroStore page for this site, which I believe Marcia has put in the chat, but she can do that again, please. You will be able to find information there. You can also send me your email address and I can send you updates like the work notices. And additionally, on the EnviroStore page, you can sign up for updates. So anytime that we upload a document to the EnviroStore page, you'll be notified via email that that a document has been uploaded. So that's how you can kind of, several different ways that you can stay up to date with this project and know what's going on in your community. So next question, please, Marcia.
I was looking for the EnviroStore page. I'll put the EnviroStore page in response to that question. I've already also shared the DTSC website. So there's two places you can go. We'll take this question from an anonymous attendee. Is SVE a type of fracking? If not, what's the difference?
Luis, Jose?
Geologist, please.
I can answer this. This is Dan.
Oh, okay. You're gonna get it, Dan? 'Cause-
Sure. So no, soil vapor extraction is not a type of fracking. Fracking is a method where you inject usually liquids under high pressure into the ground to fracture rock in order to make cracks so you can extract usually oil easier. SVE, what soil vapor extraction is installing a well and having a screened interval in a soil that's naturally permeable. So you would screen your well in a sand or a gravel where vapors would naturally flow into the well. And then you have a pump and you pump those vapors out. So it's a very different process. Instead of pumping fluids into the ground to create cracks, we're actually pulling vapors out of the ground. And those vapors would be the contaminated vapors at this site.
Thank you, Dan. And then Marcia, really quickly, I want to address Aaron's question here. There's a lot going on, but I do see a question. Basically, what specifically will you do to protect residents? And I think we have addressed this a couple of times, but there is a specific site-specific health and safety plan that will be developed for this site. Correct me, someone, if I'm wrong, it should be in the raw, and they can review it, ? And yeah, so that's where you'll be able to find that information, as well as DTSC will have oversight over this site, over the site activities that are going on at this site. So to repeat that response. Okay. So Marcia, next question, please.
I have a question from Cindy, 809, asking about developers hiring their own testing companies. Isn't it better to have DTSC take care of that process to ensure accurate results? So I believe this question is about DTSC oversight in our process and how we work with voluntary cleanup agreements.
Yes, I believe I answered that process.
You want to just reiterate it
Yeah.
again one more time for people to understand?
Sure. Under our program, we provide the oversight for the investigation and cleanup of properties contaminated. And we require the responsible parties, property owners, operators, anyone that is going to do the cleanup, to hire their own consultant. And they're required to be professional engineers and geologists, that are going to certify that all the work that is being done, under per our regulations and per our guidance documents. So we have our own professionals that review that work and, approve, deny, or modify it accordingly. And so, yes, they are in, and if we provide the oversight of these investigations, and if we suspect that, they're taking shortcuts or they're doing something to undermine the results of an investigation, we have the capability of doing our own investigations and billing the property owner for it as well. So what we don't want to do is pass on our cost to the taxpayer. So we're trying to get responsible parties, property owners, to pay for everything. Thank you.
Jose. Sorry, did someone else have something to add? Okay, sorry, I thought I heard something. Marcia, next slide, please.
Can you still see my screen?
Super, yes, I got it. Okay, we are headed to break for about 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you guys had a nice refreshing break. So we will now begin the public comment session of this meeting. So all comments made during this session will be included in the response to comments document, which will, again, it will be uploaded to the EnviroStore, as well as sent to those who have provided their contact information. If you would like a copy of the response to comments document sent to you, please send me your contact information through the chat. And if you would like to receive it via email or mail. Okay. So I would like to remind everyone to be respectful of the space that we're in, be mindful of that your neighbors are here, and that we want to give everyone an opportunity to express themselves. So this will be similar to the question and answer period. So to verbalize your comment, you can raise your hand. If you would like to provide comment in writing, we will display the ways to provide written comment on the next slide. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so for those who would like to express their comment verbally, we have some hands raised. So I will start with Armando Amaya. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I heard that this kind of being answered, or at least asked a few times already. I just wanted to like get it down right, because I think I missed it. Is there like a process in which that you can I guess apply or volunteer or allow Department of Toxic and Substances Control to go out there and like come to your house to like test your soil to see if the contaminants, the vapor contaminants, have gotten from the work site to your private property?
Thank you for your comment. Hank Aker, if you would like to express your comment for the public comment record.
Hi, my name is Michael Henry Hayden. I live on West Avenue 34. My home is 30 feet from the project site. My partner's family has been in the neighborhood for more than 50 years. My partner's uncle worked in one of the businesses on the block where this project is planned and has suffered for years from Crohn's disease and intestinal failure. So I know the dangers of the contamination they've discovered here are real and deadly. I live over a concrete foundation that is riddled with cracks that might be entryways for fumes, and I can't sleep at night recently because I know that we're at a risk of vapor intrusion, so I keep all the windows open with fans blowing even when it's cold, but I don't even know if that's enough to protect me. I've learned this year that I may be living in a poison trap, and the Department of Toxic Substance Control is treating me like I'm a nuisance for raising these concerns. DTSC's documents say we are at risk of exposure currently, but nobody is telling us anything more than that. DTSC and these developers have signed a contract that this investigation and cleanup must abide by all state and federal guidelines. This plan does not do that. We know that there are leaky sewer pipes traveling through toxic plumes that are thousands of times higher than the limit for residential housing. DTSC is ignoring their own guidance, which requires following this contamination offsite and is thus putting our lives at risk. They have not identified how far fumes are traveling through soil, if contaminants have sunk below the water table, or if they have endangered Hillside Elementary School, which is directly across the street. DTSC has used manipulative language to make people think that they will conduct an adequate investigation after the cleanup, but that's
Mr.
completely
Hayden?
backwards.
Mr. Hayden, I apologize for interrupting you. We do have translators that are interpreting, so I do request that you try to.
I can slow it down. Absolutely.
you.
I'm sorry. Okay, DTSC has used manipulative language to make people think that they will conduct an adequate investigation after the cleanup, but that is completely backwards. Investigate the extent of the problem first so that you know how to treat it. The cleanup plan will leave massive levels of poisons in the developer's soil, higher than the residential safety limit, where they may continue to threaten this neighborhood. And this plan does nothing to address whatever contamination has already left their property to impact the homes and schools across the street. Jose Diaz just said at this meeting that one of the difficulties in doing off-site testing is getting access, which is an absurd answer because we live across the street and we have been actively asking for that for more than a year. I also know that LAUSD will welcome any such investigation prompted by a regulatory agency. We have seen this project breeze through LA City Planning and Planning Commission, despite clear dangers and concerns raised by my neighbors and myself. We showed that the developers prepared false environmental reviews for this project, which were cited tonight, and repeatedly lied to everyone. But the city of LA has treated us like antagonists rather than the citizens it should protect from those who would put their profits ahead of our safety. When we finally elevated our concerns to DTSC, I really expected DTSC to take our community's defense as their own position. And I'm shocked to see that DTSC is neglecting their mission and pushing a project through that will continue the history of environmental abuse that I know this low-income majority immigrant community has already suffered for decades. Nobody has been forthright about the history of this site, and everyone in positions of authority have taken steps to silence our community rather than to meet our concerns for our health and our safety. Thank you.
Okay, I have a phone number that ends in 682. If you would like to unmute.
Thank you. Dr. Tom Williams, President of Citizens Coalition for a Safe Community, and experienced with hazmat due to my construction supervision in downtown LA for the Red Line Phase 1. We had all the same problems. However, we also found that there was PCB in a lot of our materials because of the railroads. That's why the Cornfields Arroyo Seco Historic Park is not structured. Same way with the Taylor Yard area. Some parts of it are structured, some of it will be left open. Why? Because it endangers public use. So we're quite concerned regarding the Avenue 34, and it needs a lot more discussion and a lot more details, especially in the separation of the raw versus the wrap. And we've had to do wraps. So I'm quite concerned that although 10,000 cubic yards of potentially contaminated soil may go someplace, we do not know where. And especially we do not know how much all of this is going to cost in differential between the contaminated site versus a clean site. And I've seen a lot of clean sites and I've seen a lot of dirty sites, and this is a dirty site and will be a dirty site. A little bit of background also as to, I've done archaeology and historic, and I'm quite concerned that DTSC apparently doesn't know anything about the historic Fairchild aerial photographs, which the Department of City Planning uses commonly to define hazardous material sites, because it shows you what was going on back to 1920, 22, 28, 32, 33, 38, and after the World War II. So I'm quite concerned about the adequacy and completeness of this, and also as to CEQA compliance. Since all of this Phase 1 and Phase 2 have shown that the original mitigated negative declaration is inadequate and incomplete, it should be supplemented, or it should be revised and updated with a thorough analysis of what's going on regarding hazardous materials. Groundwater. I'm quite concerned about groundwater also because it acts as a conveyance, but there's no 3D model of the entire site as to where's the best guess for the bedrock, the alluvium, the fill material, which got up to 30 some odd feet deep, and soil. I doubt if there's any soil left on the site. So it's alluvium and fill, but where does it come and where does the groundwater come from? Where does it go? Not even a
Dr. Williams?
dispersion model. Thank you.
It's been 4 minutes. Is there?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Fernanda Sanchez, if you would like to express your comment.
Hi, thank you for your time. I also just wanted to confirm and clarify if the QA portion before this is like officially on the record in addition to the public comment section. So I've been following and participating in this Avenue 34 movement since the very beginning. It has been abhorrently transparent that the well-being of my community has not been a priority. Not only have the developers falsely stated that the site was not contaminated, they villainized the community, my community, for speaking up, and they bribed the public to misrepresent and silence my community. Even after that fact, the city and its officials voted in favor for this project. And even tonight, DTSC said, and I quote, "It's an extra cost to the developers too, in regards to offsite testing and excavation of the whole site." Sympathizing with the budget of a multi-millionaire developer company is quite transparent, if you ask me. There has been plenty of precedents set in place to perpetuate violence against our brown low-income communities. My community is tired. My community is sick. Our kids and neighbors on Avenue 34 are ill, and doctors cannot explain why. Our lives are not dispensable. It is DTSC's responsibility to protect our communities from negligent toxic waste. Anything less than that would be an act of environmental racism. Thank you.
Rubina Sowell, if you would like to express your comment.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Rubina Sewell, and I'm the Executive Director of California Safe Schools. We're a Children's Environmental Health and Environmental Justice Coalition. And I just want to comment that the residents and school children and people who work in Lincoln Heights should not be treated like collateral damage. We've heard no credible justification this evening for waiting to perform offsite testing. If the same scenario were in Beverly Hills and we're talking about Harvard Westlake School instead of Lincoln Heights and Hillside Elementary, most definitely be a very different process. This community and all of the individuals who attend school or work in the area deserve much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rubina. Melanie, if you would like to express your comment.
Hi there, sorry for that delay. I am a resident in Lincoln Heights. I'm on Avenue 32. I am the mother of 3 very small children. I'm deeply concerned about the lack of concern about this site, and just kind of feels like blind compliance with just moving forward with this development. I also feel like there's just a general disdain for our community for even bringing this to light. And it was really clear, you know, I feel like every time I feel like we're making progress on this, or like someone's going to come and like be that savior for us to like help stop this development, I'm reminded that we really are on our own. And, you know, a perfect example is earlier tonight during the Q&A, the person who arguably is the reason that we are here having this discussion asked an extremely thoughtful question that I would have loved to have heard the answer to. And that was the purpose of tonight. And I'm talking about Michael Henry Hayden. And he was completely ignored. That just tells me everything that I need to know about how serious DTSC is taking this. And I'm extremely disappointed. I'm happy that you guys are having this meeting tonight. I'm appreciative of that. But I don't think that you guys are really understanding or hearing our voices or knowing the urgency of what we are about to experience as a community and what we have been experiencing as a community. And I think it is directly related to the fact that we have historically been a community who is marginalized and ignored, and like someone said earlier, just collateral damage. Thank you.
Patty Camacho, if you would like to verbalize your comment.
Yes, hi, good evening.
I'm a homeowner living on Avenue 34, and I just wanted to state my concerns about the insufficient cleanup plan that's proposed for this development. So according to the DTSC site, the CalEnviroscreen score for Lincoln Heights is 96 to 100th percentile, meaning that the Lincoln Heights community is especially vulnerable to pollution's effects. And according to your site, means that we experience a much higher pollution burden than other areas. So I'm sure I wouldn't have to search too far and see a correlation between these scores and communities of color. And even the Biden administration has promised environmental justice, especially for disadvantaged communities, recognizing that communities of color like Lincoln Heights have faced disproportionate harm from environmental contaminants for decades. And I know this has already been brought up, but the developers have been really deceptive to our community from the beginning. There is distrust in our community due to the lies, the fraudulent reports that were presented to us and to the city of Los Angeles, claiming that this property had been tested and it was not contaminated. And had it not been for our community's grassroots efforts, this project would already have broken ground. So contaminated sites such as this one damage the health and the well-being of residents who live near them. Families living near this project are being unfairly and unjustly burdened by environmental hazards under the guise of housing or affordable housing, which Lincoln Heights residents aren't even going to be able to afford. And ultimately, it's putting a profit in the pockets of these developers. I also read research that looks at the impact of contaminated sites on life expectancy. And how sad is that we are facing life-threatening health problems if this site is not adequately cleaned up. And Mr. Jose Diaz said that it would be a significant cost to developers if there is a more thorough cleanup. So where do your loyalties lie? Isn't your mission to protect public health and the environment? Sorry, I wrote notes on different pages, so I'm just so, no offense to anyone on this Zoom call, but DTSC has a well-documented track record of failing to protect vulnerable communities impacted by inadequate cleanup of contamination sites. Toxins don't stop at property lines. I don't understand why what we're asking for seems like so much, but I think that we want to feel like we are living in a safe and healthy environment. We are real people just like you. We want to live in an environment free of toxic contaminants, and we want to protect our kids and live in a healthy and safe environment. So we ask that you make your future decisions through the lens of the residents who live near this project, and consider, what would it be like if your family was living across the street? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, and Snacky, would you please express your comment?
Hi, it's Snacky here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. I just want to talk about the site, the Avenue 34 site. It's the hotbed of the environmental justice movement of LA, one of the first environmental justice cases going back to the turn of the century. The site characterization report for this case is totally just misinformed and wrong. The biggest industry or the biggest nuisance that was happening over there on that site it's the rock crushers. At the turn of the century, there were many rock crushing operations in the Arroyo, crushing up the rocks, making sand for the cement for downtown, right? But then they were also widening and deepening the channel. The rock crusher guy, his name was Halsey. And there was a huge lawsuit, and it was spearheaded by Charles Lummis and some community orgs. So these rock crushers were pumping out fumes, gas, and then they're basically, it's a floodplain there. The reason there's 30 feet of infill on the Avenue 34 site is because it's not the original property. They were pumping the gravel and the sand and aggregate back up onto the land to make it higher. from the floods. So whatever, yeah, the records that we have, it's like the original land's like way deeper. And I did a detailed parcel search for every LADBS permit for both parcels, Welch's and Avenue 34, and I have like hundreds of listings. Basically, the Welch's property actually was on the Avenue 34 site, and they were moving, grading. There's hundreds and thousands of cubic yards of earth that was graded just by the property owner as the contractor, and basically between 1920 and the 60s. The 60s is when they really went crazy. They were moving that soil all around both properties. So yeah, the site characterization report that the city signed off on, it's totally just lacking. I have the documents, I'll send them, but thanks a lot. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. Anna Tran, if you would like to express your comment verbally.
Hello. As a youth of Lincoln Heights, I'd just like to say that the toxins will affect the people of my generation the most, like the kids at Hillside, which I once was. We will be the ones to suffer the most from the health issues such as cancer and respiratory illnesses that this project will likely bring down the line. Like someone said, we are not collateral damage. Our lives matter too. And look, the pollution in Lincoln Heights and Los Angeles at all is just bad enough already. Please don't add to it. This project was lied about to the start. We were told that it was safe by the developers and that they were looking into it. And guess what? It's extremely toxic. And we have a lot. And guess what? We have a lot of student athletes in this neighborhood. Imagine endangering them like that. My high school just had a basketball game today, and it was a home game. And like these developers have also paid people to call in previous meetings in support of this project. That's like so corrupt. And they've threatened us as well, basically insinuating that they'd go through with this project anyway without our consent. Even if they were going to clean things up, do we want that sort of presence in our neighborhood? And even if they clean it up, I honestly don't know whether to trust it or not. Do projects with similar situations in the past or in other cities that have similar promises and those promises just never being filled? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay. Amanda Roth-Ho, if you'd like to express your comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. I'm a Lincoln Heights business owner, and I'm also located, like a few other people, tonight directly across the street from the site. I haven't measured, but it's close to 30 feet, something like that, similar to some other folks. And I want to strongly urge DTSC to increase the scope of your investigation and ask that you specifically and closely examine the surrounding area beyond the property lines. Again, more specifically in the adjacent underground tunnels and sewers, which has been brought up a couple times tonight and has been totally overlooked. A couple minutes ago, Mr. Diaz mentioned that if data indicated off-site testing was needed, you would move forward, but this is confounding because it seems really clear that we're well beyond that point. And the likelihood of this danger is already obvious and imminent. As others have mentioned tonight, there has been no credible evidence tonight to prove otherwise. And it's incredibly upsetting to hear that this extra testing is not warranted based on existing data or worth it because of cost or labor or because it's burdensome. This is literally putting profits above people. And it's not enough to repeat the word oversight over and over. We need specific assurances. It's really essential that this testing be extensive and exhaustive to determine the effects the extreme toxicity is having in our community. It's just point blank. The data I've seen indicates that this is unambiguous in the presence of harmful toxins emitting from the site with families and businesses cited just feet away is devastating and frankly shocking. And it confirms that the Lincoln Heights residents are living in close proximity to this dangerous condition and likely regularly being exposed to this confirmed toxicity. I just can't imagine that we would just sit on our hands with this. Already we're becoming aware that neighbors are experiencing health issues that could potentially be linked to these toxins, and this knowledge should just immediately initiate a rigorous and thorough investigation. Frankly, to willfully ignore this information is madness, and more importantly, it's negligent, bordering on criminal. It's critical that the DTSC complete a thorough investigation and rigorously test the underground pipes in the presence of harmful vapors right now, not wait till any other cleanup efforts to assess the risks to the surrounding neighborhood. We really deserve to know what harmful toxicity is being emitted from the sewers and what contamination families, children, and residents are being exposed to on a daily basis. And I just also want to say, against the backdrop of a global pandemic that continues to devastate communities in the form of emerging variants every day, literally today, finding out that, we have a California case, this unchecked toxic site is a health crisis that threatens to even further harm the well-being of an already precarious neighborhood. We're relying on you to act right now and not later before more harm is done. Just before I close, I just want to also say that this community, like others have mentioned tonight, has gone over and above to fight for its rights. And over, everyone has sent the message that our rights don't matter and that our efforts to protect ourselves are just a nuisance. And the strategy of exhausting the community into complacency by setting up endless bureaucratic obstacle courses is totally transparent, and we notice. You can hear in everyone's comments and questions tonight that there's a total culture of distrust around this project. And because we've been lied to and deceived consistently throughout the process, we need extra assurances. So, again, mentioning oversight and mentioning, that there is no evidence to prove that it is dangerous is not enough. We need to be considered a high priority in this, and this community has done the work, putting in tireless volunteer hours of advocacy and research, identifying hazards that stand to directly harm our neighbors and citizens. And frankly, this is the work that the officials and government agencies should be doing that are designed to protect the health and welfare of the public. We are having this conversation because the community has done the due diligence and has pushed back and asked all these questions. I also just quickly want to echo my disappointment about what Melanie mentioned, which was when Michael's question was completely shut down and unanswered about the sewer line. I even asked about this in the Q&A and was also ignored. So I just want to put that in the official record. It's time for our leaders and those in positions of power and influence to display some moral courage and put people over profits and special interest. It's absolutely ridiculous and shameful that this community has to have rallied as hard as it had in order to be treated with basic dignity and protect their rights. It's really disgusting that those in positions of influence are willing to leverage a potentially devastating health crisis, willfully ignore science and clear warning signs, and sacrifice the wellness of an innocent community because it's not financially or politically expedient or aligned with agendas of profit. Thank you.
For your comment. Okay. Ramona Barajas, if you would like to express your comment.
Yes, apart from the environmental hazards that everybody has eloquently stated, and I agree with, I wanted to know if there was an environmental impact report on traffic, which also adds to the pollution. We already have major housing on San Fernando Road, almost right across the street from the project's going to be. It's impacting our traffic, it's impacting our freeways, it's impacting the bicyclists that have already gotten run over. You've already had 3 in the last year, and I know that this is a TOC project because you're next to the metro. And some rules have been overlooked, but I wanted to know if you ever did an impact report on the traffic itself and safety concerns for kids that walk to school, that take buses to school, that take the metro to school, along with other riders. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. So, Sarah Solis, if you would like to express your comment.
Yes, I'd like to echo what a lot of the other speakers talked about, their concerns of the contamination. I am very concerned that the boundaries of contamination are not yet defined, that you just tested on site. You didn't look off site to see if it had spread. In Highland Park at Spence Dry Cleaners, there was a settlement agreement in 2017. Then in 2020, they found contamination on a neighboring site. So you guys don't have a great record of predicting where the contamination stops and if it is going to continue spreading. So I think you should find out how far this contamination is. You can't limit the testing to on-site. You have to test off-site. Also, the concerns about the sewer pipes, I think that is very valid. And I think you need to take a little more time to do more public outreach and give the community greater time to participate. I think some of the ideas that people brought up about having a community oversight board, that DTSC should help the residents set that up, so that with a expert provided to the residents who would be for the residents to help them understand this. And I think you should do that because I mean, this is a very vulnerable environmental justice community in Lincoln Heights who is facing this contamination, and they deserve to be protected by the state of California, which hasn't always done a good job in environmental justice communities. I'm also concerned about the workers. You haven't protected the workers who work on these cleanup projects, ensuring that their families are not contaminated when they bring home clothes that is dirty. So I just really hope you guys will have a very transparent plan that tells and outlines all of this. And I think you need to go back to the table and do more testing in the community and find out how far the boundaries of contamination extends. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. So that is the last hand that I have raised. So I will ask our interpreters if you can please call out first on the Spanish line, if we have any callers on the Spanish conference line, if there's any comments from the Spanish conference line. All right, so thank you so much. We have no comments from the Spanish conference line, and from the Mandarin conference line, would you please let us know if there are any questions from the Mandarin conference line?
I don't hear any comments from the Mandarin line.
Thank you so much, Scarlett. Okay, so thank you all so much for joining us this evening, for your interest and for participating. So again, all of these comments will be responded to in a response to comments document that will be available on Envirostore, on the Envirostore page for this site. You can also, again, type into the chat now to me directly your email address or your mailing address, and that way we can send you out the response to comments. If you would also like to be a part of our email or mailing list, you can send me that information if you have not done so. Okay, so this meeting was recorded and will be posted on the Avenue 34 website, dtsc.ca.gov/avenue-34. Again, you'll find the meeting materials there as well. Thank you all again, and stay safe.